Before we dive into today's webinar on global holiday flavors, infusing festive dishes with international pantry trends, we'd like to thank Schwann's for sponsoring this session. Schwann's Food Service is an industry leader in premium prepared foods, bringing their expertise to a wide portfolio of pizza and Asian-style products. Explore them all at schwannsfoodservice.com and discover the solutions you need to succeed. For those unfamiliar with the American Culinary Federation, we are the leading organization for culinary professionals, offering education, certification, and a community for chefs and food service leaders. If you're not yet a member, today's webinar is a great example of the valuable resources we offer. Today, we'll be joining ACF Chef Clyde Tanner as he helps us unlock the potential of global pantry ingredients to spark our holiday culinary creations. In this session, he will guide us into the ways trending flavors from around the world can infuse new life into seasonal dishes, whether it's enhancing a cherished recipe or inventing something entirely fresh. This webinar will be sure to help us continue to embrace the impact of global ingredients by infusing our holiday menus with vibrant international flavor profiles. Feel free to ask questions using the Q&A function at any time during this. Let's get started by sharing where you're tuning in from and type it right into the chat for us. I'm Chris Tanner, ACF's Executive Director, and I'm excited to be here with all of you. Let's meet today's presenter, Chef Clyde Tanner, CEC, CCE, AAC. He is a seasoned culinary professional with over 25 years of culinary expertise who specializes in blending global flavors into innovative and memorable dishes. Certified as a certified executive chef by the American Culinary Federation, Chef Tanner has spearheaded culinary projects from top-tier restaurants and served as national chair for the International Culinary Schools. Currently, Chef Clyde Tanner is a principal managing partner at Tanner's Team LLC, where he provides business advisory and hospitality consulting services, helping clients achieve excellence within the food service industry. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Chef Tanner. I think it's the first time I've ever used that, and it's not me. So you take it away, Chef Tanner.
Hey, thank you for the introduction, Chef Tanner. Yeah, it's a little confusing, but it's all apropos and very it fits very much. I really appreciate it. I know Chris Tanner, Chef Tanner, last year put out a call for people with certain specialties to volunteer to do these seminars, and I jumped on it really quickly because this is some of my love, some of my passion, and things that I enjoy to do. Just to let you know a little bit about myself, besides what Chef Tanner has already informed you of, is I grew up in a very eclectic household with restaurateurs. We had family members from the Latin American side with Mexican restaurants, Peruvian restaurants, to my other side of my family on the Asian side that had sushi restaurants, to Korean and a whole bunch of other Japanese teppanyaki grills and so forth. So I grew up with these flavor profiles, but I'm a classically trained chef, which is very apropos from the West Coast where I grew up on, because we blended those French, Italian, German, Russian, Mediterranean flavors, and blended it right in, with the Latin American flavor profiles and the Asian. And so I basically grew up as a West Coast chef. West Coast cuisine's probably my specialty. And we're going to explore some of those things and some of the trends that we see in our industry today. I'm going to go just a little slow because this transition might take a little bit. Okay. Oops, something here. So we're looking at trends in the Asian pantry today, as well as the Latin pantry. And we're just going to take a short, brief dive in a couple of the flavor profiles of each, because just can't cover everything in one seminar. And hopefully you'll have me back and we'll do some other stuff. Recently, I was involved in a culinary medicine program with the University of South Florida Graduate School of Medicine. We did an interprofessional studies day on culinary medicine. I'm not saying that they were doing culinary as medicine, but it all is related to health, okay? So in this world of ours, there's two white jackets, okay? We recognize the chef uniform, which we represent, and a doctor has his white, scrubs on. And we see those two jackets, but they also represent two of the most important things, which is, okay, health, okay, and preventative medicine. Both of us take care of that. So a chef, is responsible for the health and welfare of the people, feeding the nation, feeding the world. Okay. And a doctor's there protecting the health on the other end. So I'm proud to have a white coat. And in working with the other doctors that realize that medicine and culinary go hand in hand was just such a privilege. And I had a couple of our other ACS chefs join me, Chef Dan Miller, Michael Rigberg. They came by and lend their expertise in that interprofessional study day. But we covered everything from the microbiome, gut health, to diabetes and trends, and even social economic issues related to how we eat. Um, Having said that, that's some of the stuff that we are going to touch on in this seminar today. We're primarily going to focus on the fermentation revival, umami-rich elements, and the health-conscious alternatives. Um, there is a link with Asian cuisine and Latin cuisine. I'm going to save that for later, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get there. But trends in our microbiome, everything from Netflix, docuseries, to YouTubers and to medical health science are all getting into the microbiome. Our microbiome is that diverse colony of bacteria and every other bug in our gut that actually helps support our immune system, our health, and so forth. So one of the ingredients that us chefs don't even realize that we do, and it's the first thing we do in culinary school, is make stock. Okay. And we make stock because we want that collagen to make, sauces and gelatins and everything, that we do to make our food flavorful and texture and body and mouthfeel. So that collagen is actually the one thing our body needs to line our stomachs, line our guts, so that, all the bacteria and the whole microbiome have a healthy living environment. And so what we're going to look at today is that fermentation revival. Okay. A lot of us understand what fermentation is. Fermentation's been here for archaeologically, we could find evidence of fermentation all the way back 8,000 years. Okay. So fermentation is a metabolic process where microorganisms like yeast, bacteria, molds, convert to carbohydrates such as sugars. Sugar gets converted into alcohol, gases, and acids. Okay, this all enhances. Oops, get a little touchy there with the slide. All enhances the food, preservation, flavor, and digestibility. Okay, so this is a growing aspect, in the culinary trends, even though it's old. Okay, because of the health benefits that it gives us. Okay, fermentation gives us the probiotics. Okay, it supports our immune system. It's anti-inflammatory in properties, okay? And it's highly adaptable both in traditional and modern fusion cuisines. And then one of the things we're going to look at is coming up is miso, a little bit of kimchi, and gochujang, because these are highly fermented foods. There's so many applications that we can use this, everything from sauces to marinades, desserts, okay? Because it will add that umami um, um, to our palates, okay? And everybody understands that umami is that glutamate channel that we get, and everybody's heard of MSG. Now, MSG is not the perfect ingredient. Okay. And salt is not the perfect ingredient. Okay. It has its place, it has its benefits, but what people have is a misconception that MSG is unnatural. Okay. If MSG was unnatural, we wouldn't have most of our foods. And we wouldn't eat most of our foods because of that savory component that we love. So, one of America's most a favorite dish probably is the number one, number two, food eaten up there with hamburgers is pizza. So natural umami inside that cheese, that tomato sauce, those are packed with glutamates, or monosodium glutamates. But we're just going to say glutamates because, we didn't crystallize and ferment it out into crystals. And FYI, MSG is fermented. Okay. Today, the cheap process is to take cassava root, grind it down until a pulp or a paste. That pulp or paste then is, boiled, yeast is added, and it ferments and turns into a black liquid. And then they use, for lack of a better term, a big coffee filter. Okay. Just to give you an image, they have a big paper filter. They filter it through a big paper filter. You get liquid on the other end, and they set it out just like you see those beds of salt, and it turns into the MSG crystal. There is nothing having to do with chemical processes or anything in there. It's 100% natural. And in fact, we know Dr. Ikeda in Japan was the scientist who took, kombu and dashi, distilled it down. I'm sorry, I said dashi, but I meant the kombu and shiitake mushrooms, distilled it down and actually isolated the glutamate, monosodium glutamate. And so he's the one who got, credit for naming the glutamate channel on our tongue umami. However, at the same time, and yes, a white coat, Chef Maggie over in France created the bouillon, okay, by hydrolyzing vegetables. Did he understand what he was making was MSG? No, but the hydrolyzed vegetables just added flavor, and it was right from those vegetables that we got the bouillon. So exact same time, same processes, one from a culinary standpoint, one from a scientific standpoint, and then we got bouillon. Now, bouillon today has been modified from Chef Maggie, but same process of creating and enriching those umami, savory taste. And so let's move on to, okay, the fermentation revival miso. And we're going to talk about miso today. In the US, we're sold miso in three forms. Okay, we got white miso, red miso, and mixed miso. That's simplified, but I want you to really understand what miso really is. Okay, it's really simple. It's made from three ingredients: soybeans. Okay, then there's salt, and there's koji, or the mold. This mold can be grown from rice. So it's the mold off of rice. It's the mold off of wheat, barley, stuff like that. And it could be the mold off of beans. Okay. So white, red, and mixed is oversimplified. But that's what we're shown in the United States because we don't understand all the intricacies of what miso is. So when we look at white, okay, traditionally white miso versus red miso, what's the difference? It's just the way that they're actually fermented. White miso, lighter color miso, is what you call a boiled soybean. Then they start their fermentation with the mold and the salt. Now, the darker the miso comes from steaming the soybeans before we start the fermentation. So that pulls out some of the proteins that can get darker and more tan. However, that's not what red miso is. red miso actually comes from the fermentation process of the koji mold from beans. Okay, so koji beans, there's several different beans. So there's actually the variety of miso that we're most familiar with is rice miso because it was the molds from rice. We do get some of the wheat misos because we'll notice just like a roux goes from blonde to black. Okay, right in the middle is where we usually get the wheat miso, and it's aged a little longer, so it gets a little bit darker. So there's those complexities. So when we see a mixed, let's say miso, it's usually a combination of white miso, rice miso, and a wheat miso being put together. Okay. And then when we see the darker red, like we see on the screen, that is, from the bean miso. Having said that, is you're going to have to explore and taste these different misos because they're fragrant, right? So obviously the red, the darker one, you're going to get a lot more of the savory, earthy, just downright dirty, just like drinking red wine. And that miso, where the white one is like from the rice is a floral young wine, instead of a Cabernet, now you got a Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, and those other varietals they're just brand new, ready to drink, and you just have the florals hitting your head. And somewhere in the middle, like the wheat misos are like a Chardonnay or Merlot, little, lighter, goes and pairs with different ingredients. Okay, so it's simplified. You only have three ingredients in miso. Okay. Um, you know, the one thing I do want to say about miso, it is very, very, very salty. Okay. However, here's the unusual thing with that. We know that salt, okay, people with predispositions to high blood pressure avoid salt, okay, because it raises their blood pressure because we take in more fluids go into our veins. Therefore, there's, just like a hydraulic system can increase that blood pressure. Other one is salt is linked with stomach cancer. So as you increase your salt, I think it was at 4 grams, over your daily limit, you start to increase 8% exponentially risk of stomach cancer. Now, how many people do we see in blue zones, Asia, Mediterranean, with high blood pressure risk, especially over than Japan? So let's look at Okinawa, where some of these people are living, long and into their hundreds, and they have one of the longest longevity of just about any population, and their primary diet is full of miso. Interesting studies have come out and demonstrated that these antioxidant properties of miso, right? There's antioxidant properties. It's high in vitamin B, very complex things. It's an NAD booster to help us with our help us with what you call repair. But the most interesting thing is miso has a different effect on blood pressure. It actually helps and can stabilize and lower it. So although miso's very salty, it has that paradoxical reaction from salt. So the good news is if you can get a dish and you want to be heart healthy, heart conscious, you could use miso for the seasoning because it's full of salt instead of salt, and it'll actually help people with blood pressure risk, as well as we all know the other um, uh, benefits of fermented foods. So, so that's an interesting thing. And you guys, I told the organizers, anytime you guys have questions, just type it in. They'll interrupt me. And then you guys can ask me some questions if you want to get into more detail. We're going to explore these flavors, but I want just to go on to gochujang. Okay. So gochujang is made from red chili powder, okay, and glutinous rice with fermented soybeans and salt, okay? This is a little take off of miso, but with chili paste, okay? The red chili actually comes from a chili called cheongyang pepper, and unfortunately, I have not seen it in the United States at all. So maybe somebody can order some and grow some here and produce it. It'd be a great thing. But it's actually a Korean chili pepper. But just because I say it's a Korean chili pepper, okay, and we know that chilies aren't peppers because Columbus just decided to say chili because that's what he's familiar with was I meant pepper because he's familiar with, the normal black pepper. But chilies are actually berries, right? But they're hot, just like peppers. So although it's a Korean chili pepper, okay, chili peppers are not indigenous to Asia. We got it later because of Columbus, and we'll explain a little bit more about that probably a little later. But look at miso. Miso is a fermented soybean. Gochujang uses that fermented soybean. Okay, and here's the interesting fact is. About 2,000 years ago, um, fermented soybeans actually came from China. It propagated its way down into Japan, Korea, Thailand, India, and so forth. So miso is a phenomenon because they've used the mold in so many different ways to create the aromatics. But is miso actually the original fermentation of soybeans came from China? Okay, which if you look at Japan's here, China's here, Korea's down here uh, attached like a little appendix to China. And so it evolved in that same regional space. Okay. So we could see the similarities and things that got passed down to the different cultures. Okay. So gochujang is a chili, that yang chili pepper has that very sweet. So if you guys ever had a guajillo pepper from like Mexico, when you smell it, it has that sweet fragrance. Okay. And this pepper has a Scoville somewhere about 6 to 8,000, as low as 4,000. So it fits in between a jalapeno and a serrano. Jalapenos sometimes are hotter, and with more Scoville, and sometimes down to that 4,000, just like this pepper. And this pepper can go up to 8,000, where a serrano starts. So it fits right in there. It's not too hot. But has a very aromatic, sweet quality about it. Okay. It's, it can be used for bases for dipping sauces, added to dressings, even added to mayonnaise, and, ketchup for a spicy twist. So right now, one of the hottest things is, and everybody's been doing it for, a decade now, is sticking the sriracha inside the mayo and calling it spicy mayo. Okay. Same thing with gochujang. Okay. But gochujang, that chili paste actually has this very, very good sticky, what you call it? Sticky texture. Unlike sriracha is just very liquidy and fluid. This one's actually very sticky and it has a texture. So when you put it in the marinades and so forth, it grabs very well because it is particles. So if you're going to make a Korean chili wings or you're going to just add it to something to marinate it in, it'll actually hold to the skin very well. And that's a gochujang. We're going to talk about some of the foods you can make with it. But one of the notes that I want you to understand about gochujang is because we lived in a processed food world today, they take shortcuts. Okay. And yes, when I go into the Asian market and everything's written in a foreign language, like you see on the bottle on your screen, I can't read it either. But fortunately, in the United States, they have to list the ingredients in English, even if it's just a sticker. So what you are looking for is you're looking for gochujang that is made with rice flour. Specifically, the best one is the sweet rice flour, but you want to see the rice flour as the leading bulker agent for the gochujang versus you'll see a lot of them are made with wheat. If that's what you can get, that's what you can get. It's pretty good, but if you want something that just has that little richer, more fragrant flavor, find the one that has the sweet rice or the rice flour inside of it. Okay? So let's look at some of the examples of how we can use miso, because everybody says miso, oh, we're going to make a miso soup. All right. So, and miso soup's great, guys. Don't get me wrong. It's wonderful. But miso has that umami, and you don't need a lot of it because it's salt, it's salty and so rich. You just need to use a dash of it. The other thing with miso is don't put miso on something and stick it in a 500-degree oven. At that point, you're just salting. You're not actually seasoning the dish with that miso because it'll just take away all the fragrance and flavor of that miso. Now, if you're using the miso as a salt substitute, go ahead and bake it off and you can kill it because it still has that fermented qualities and that effect. But if you want the miso flavor to stay, make sure you're not using it in high temperature cooking. So
Hey,
sauces are
chef,
perfect
you,
because you don't
you,
overshoot it. Yes, Christopher.
you had that comment on substitution that kind of sparked a question here. So I wanted to ask the
Yes.
question while you were there. Says, is it possible to use miso the same way anchovies are used?
Well, yeah, absolutely. But you got to remember, miso is just fermented bean paste. So like anchovies are made from fish, right?
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so we do and that's one of the things I do is I like the MSG, but I don't want to go out and buy a whole bunch of MSG. So I'll substitute anchovies in there because anchovies is actually heightens the flavor of glutamates. That's why when we make a dashi stock, we put bonito flakes in there. We got the seaweed, we got the shiitake mushrooms, but we put the bonito flakes in there because it enhances and it has that symbiotic relationship with glutamates and enhances that savory component of umami. So, um, so I would say I get it, just like a Caesar salad, created down there in Tijuana, Mexico, where they put the anchovies in to heighten some of the flavors and the umamis, and believe it or not, the Parmesan cheese. So that's a good way, but I would say they two different components, but you could use it as a backbone in that technical sense. Yes, it can be a backbone of something, especially the red miso, because it's just the saltiness of the anchovies, even sardines to that. But if you want to substitute the anchovies, fish sauce is a great one, but make sure you're allergy conscious. So if we're serving this to the public, remember shellfish, stuff like that. So make sure you know your clientele on that side. Okay. So we look right here. So we see as Chilean sea bass, right, with beetroot and miso and uzu white wine sauce. Okay, very easy. And if you think about it, a lot of times when we're making beurre blancs and so forth, we got to pad that butter. But the miso's giving us just a little texture along with the beets. We don't have to cremate the wine and the butter and everything just to get a nice texture out of our sauce. Okay. So right here I have a link and you guys are going to receive this slide deck and it has examples of miso dishes. It also has examples of gochujang style dishes. Okay. And we're going to go over here. So let's look at some of these holiday season things just to spark your creativity, right? We got a miso ginger glaze, with a caramel drizzle, perfect for holidays desserts, right? I noticed, was it Hot Mike's or somebody else is making a sriracha honey? We've been doing gochujang honey glazes, probably for the last 200 years in Korea, right? That gochujang and honey is a great classic pairing. Put it on a ham, a roast, because you remember that fragrance of that paste along with that texture and bulk, and then that sweet and savory component going together will just sit there. It won't make your ham into a Korean ham. It'll just hide in the flavor for something they've never had. And then you add that smokiness in a lot of the hams, especially those country hams. And man, that smoke and the gochujang just go together. Okay. Um, and let me go back to the whoops. I kind of, let me see, kind of messed up my notes here. Okay, there we go. I think slide forward is a gochujang. Um, I'm going to tell you some stuff about gochujang in a little bit. But look at that ham. The other one is we hear a lot about kimchi, and I know a lot of people here are already familiar with kimchi, eat kimchi, use kimchi. There's radish kimchis and so forth. They go by different names, but it's still all kimchi, right? Adding that to stuffing, adding that to a rice dish, adding that fermented flavors just gives it that backbone. Why do we like going into the taco shop and getting those authentic tacos? Because they got pickled carrots, pickled jalapenos, pickled onions, and we put that fermented right in there, and it just gives you that sharp acid bite that you're looking for, and just makes everything bright and clear. So those are some of the holiday eyes deals. You can use the kimchi without even changing things too much. And we talked about the umami rich elements inside the dashi stock, right? Okay, so dashi is the kombu, the bonito flakes, and the shiitake mushrooms, and they all combine together to make basically a glutamate broth. Okay, so we could take this glutamate broth, guys. Okay, the dashi. Let me see. Where do I have one slide coming up later. Okay, but we could take this dashi stock and we can use it for the bases of our stocks. Okay, we could add it to our chicken stock, we can add it to our beef stock just to pump up that natural glutamates inside that. Okay, now MSG, when you put in the powder, has 200 times the glutamates of this. So this is a very natural way to add those extra savory elements without overdosing, guys. Okay. Okay. Then, when you get your slide decks, here's kombu, here's dashi rich broths and soups to help you out. And I linked some of the files, and I linked some of the files to the shiitake mushrooms. But here are some health conscious alternatives that you can make. Okay. I don't know if everybody really knows this, but technically, all tea starts from green tea. Yes, there's different varietals and so forth, but oolong tea, green tea, black tea, all those teas are actually just a process of how they roast them. So green tea is actually not roasted, just dried out and served to us. So matcha is a green tea, right? So matcha, tofu, edamame. So there's, applications that we can use green tea, edamame for plant-based diets, vegan and for savory dishes. So being health conscious, okay? Here are some resources. I'm not going to go over the resources because I'm going to go over to what we want. So Thanksgiving, Christmas time, or just about any time, because even an airline breast with a gravy, you could do a kombu dashi, put that with your turkey stock, your chicken stock, and you can make a dashi gravy, just backbone, and just balance those flavor profiles. If you want a little more of that dashi fragrance to come in, use a little more of the dashi stock. If not, use a little more of the chicken stock and use that for the backbone of your dish. Okay, shiitake mushrooms holiday stuffing. So I made a stuffing this year, a little more something my grandfather used to do, and he used to use a lot of hot Italian sausage. But I mixed up lion's mane mushrooms, cremini mushrooms, shiitake mushrooms, and probably about 7, 8 different varietals of mushrooms. But remember, shiitake is the main ingredient that Dr. Akita found the MSG in. Okay, so when we cook that down, get all the water out and make it rich and delicious, it just elevates it higher and higher. Everybody ate the stuffing and nobody even realized there was mushrooms in it except for me, because it's just the backbone of the dish that makes it, so savory. Then you got stuff like matcha snowball cookies, okay, guava glazed hams, okay. So these are all different ideals, and we can see that guava is an Asian ingredient, and now we're linking it back over to the Americas, which lead us into the Transatlantic American Pantry, and we're going to explore a little bit of this. And um, so Latin American foods rely heavily on native plants, animals creating distinct flavors. Okay. Um, but here's the thing, the Latin American profile is the oldest profile in the world, older than Chinese, older than the Mediterranean, older than European and African, because it hasn't changed much. It's the same, profile with the corn, the chili peppers, and everything else. But there's been influences into the Latin America exploration. Remember, I said we're going to link back Asia and the Latin America, right? So we can see that the Spanish and Portuguese that came over to Latin America, they brought out, Latin America gave us the chili peppers and their flavor profiles, but the Spanish and Portuguese brought over onions. They brought over cilantro, citrus fruits, olives, dairy products, live dishes, livestock, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So think about European, and we think of our most famous dish of pudding and custards and creme brulee. That's where the Latin American flavor profile adapted those European flavors and created flan. Okay, enslaved Africans. Oops, got a little trigger happy again. The enslaved African American or Africans, because they're not necessarily over here, brought their techniques and transformed plantains, yams, okra, and so forth. Brazilian black bean stew is one of those Latin American crossovers from Africa. And then we got the Asian influence, believe it or not. Okay, Chinese and Japanese immigrants brought soy sauce, ginger, a lot of their cooking techniques to countries like Peru, and made those fusion Japanese Peruvian dishes. And that's the thing with these Latin America is because we came from overseas, came in here, and we found a wealth and a flavor profile that was just amazing, and they adapted everything. Think about Vietnam and the banh mi. It's on a French baguette, right? It's that French, Asian influence, and that's the same thing that happened, especially in Mexico. So, so one of the ingredients of Peru is that ají amarillo. This is a really great yellow spicy pepper. Okay. We know that Latin America had a lot of squashes. We're very familiar with chayote, and then we have that South American tea. To Asia, we have that guava ingredient that binds everything together. So just talking about that blend of flavors, if we let's just look at some Mexican cuisine, okay? Tacos el pastor is Middle Eastern shawarma. The flour tortilla, not the corn tortilla, the flour tortilla, right, is actually naan bread. Carne asada is made with soy sauce, is a very good Chinese meat cooking method. And let's go to pork carnitas, okay? That's duck confit, but now it's pork confit. So we can see how these Asian and European influences came over here. And what I'm saying to you about the tie with Asia, the Asian cuisine today, gochujang and all that would not be here unless we had the Latin American, uh, um, you know, uh, chili peppers or chili berries, because Columbus took them over to Europe, took them to, initially Spain, Portugal, and it eventually made its way all the way to Asia. Okay. And chili peppers, on the most part, were in Asia more of a peasant food. But you know what happens when the masses of the people get it, just like ribs here in the United States, hey, throw away the ribs, and the indentured servants and slaves said, hey, that's the best part, and we're going to make this delicious. So that's what happened to the peppers. So all peppers actually come from Mesoamerica. Okay. There's archaeological evidence of peppers all the way back 7,000 years, Aztec and everything else. It is part of their culture, is part of their spiritual beliefs, that everything, in this Mesoamerican frame. But if you think about it, peppers are also have a high medicinal quality. Okay. Things that we take from peppers, anti-inflammatory, antibacterial, and everything. And that's why peppers just got propagated through the world through Mesoamerica, because they're that good. Okay. And so we're looking at Mesoamerican, here's some of the stuff that you can do with it, right? So uh, you can do a chelipin, take the chelipin pepper, you can make an olive tamponade out of it, right? The poblano, let's make a pesto out of the poblano. It has some of the same herb and green qualities, but with that little dry, mild flavor. Put a little ancho chili pepper inside that. It'll just spice it right up. The Europeans had a pepper called paprika. Paprika, we use it for coloring that did today, and it's not very hot. But traditionally, it was a very, very spicy pepper, closer to cayenne pepper. But add those ingredients. But I'm talking about those because that smoky notes that go well inside there. And then we have jalapenos. Everybody knows jalapenos. And let's cross this back over with that jalapeno miso glaze. Okay. And then we got the serranos, a little hotter pepper. But hey, using serranos in a ginger stir fry. Okay. Whoops. I just get a little bit too uh, trigger happy there. Habanero Pete's jams. Everybody familiar with that? And guajillo. That's that pepper. I describe close to the Korean pepper. You make it a guajillo marinade mated. And remember, tofu grabs any flavor. So that's an ideal that you could do, is a guajillo marinated tofu. Okay. Now, we're gonna, we got to think about these flavor profiles and mix them up, right? Textures and crunch and so forth. So we can look at a chayote salad. What about a chayote gratin with Gruyère's cheese? Something more traditional that we can go. We got guava for that sweet tart flavor, so we can use the guava and make it into a pork marinade, right? So use that smoky chipotle, the smoked jalapenos and chipotle, and make a guava pork taco, okay? And then we have the guava bratwurst sauerkraut. It sounds weird, but I did make this glaze. I did not create guava glaze bratwurst sauerkraut. I saw it. I made up the glaze bratwurst. I already had some fermented sauerkraut in my house that we made. It was delicious because it just took a little sharpness off that sauerkraut, and enhanced that fermented flavor in the bratwurst. It's just yum. So you got to think about things like that. So that ajillo, Amarillo pepper is a bright yellow pepper. Using that in sauces inside a risotto here, ahi amarillo risotto, will just give it that little color lift that sometimes you need, right? Squash with tomatoes and green chilies. You can even do a southern, pickled green tomato with pickled coyote squash, and serve that as a salad, and there's so many combinations you can get into here. So for Christmas time, holidays, just think about using that guajillo chili roasted chicken. Stuff your bird with it. Put it on the bottom with your mirepoix so it can come up, and rub that on there. We already talked about habanero peach glaze on your turkey, maybe the gratin, and also a heel Amarillo pepper does have a nice heat bite. I'm not saying it's habanero, but it's closer to Serrano, has that little heat index. Mix it into your mashed potatoes a little bit, and people will just get that background of that heat. You can almost use it instead of something like black pepper. Okay. So I just briefly want to talk about, your innovation and your member, into your menus, because it's great to have all this knowledge, but how do we integrate it into our menus without changing our identity? We built our reputations, we built our restaurants strong, and we're known for a certain, flavor profile. That's why people come to us. So we don't want to change our identity. But we need to innovate, because if we don't innovate, pretty soon people get bored, because it's that the laws of diminishing demand, right? First time you have something, it's wow. Second time it's a wow. Next time is, that was pretty dang good. I missed that, right? And then we have to leave and then come back to get that wow back and forth. And then pretty soon people are like, yeah, I've had that before. Okay, so we always have to innovate and change. So when you do these global ingredients, start small. Just make a tweak, put a special, and incorporate a few of the global ingredients. Train your staff. Restaurants today are about entertainment. Okay. I know there's the turn and burn restaurants and so forth, but things are about entertainment. Okay. Everything from the waitresses moving around to looking at open kitchens. It's an entertain. I go out to eat because it's different from doing something at home. It's entertaining. And we have to create that entertainment. So when I speak to a well-trained server and they tell me the story behind a food product, I am more likely to buy that than if I just said, here's specials today, you want X, Y, or Z. Okay. So train your staff on the origin stories behind this thing. Hey, you know what? Today, this is what we're trying, and this is why. And here's a little backstory behind it. And it's like, that sounds interesting. Let me try that. Okay. But the most important thing is that feedback back loop, collect and just refine your main menu based on the customer's preferences. So don't start all or nothing. Get in there, start adding some stuff, and then you'll be able to just incorporate that those global flavors to just up your flavor profile just a little bit more. Okay. So, like I said, strategies in the marketing, even on your website, it's all about taking the unique cultural story and the ingredients, because it's entertainment. Okay. We live in an entertainment society. Okay. I'm going to jump down to the third point because I want to come back and spend my remainder of my time on the middle point. Offer tasting menus or special menu items featuring global ingredients. So let's say you're an Italian restaurant and you got some Asian inspired menu items that you want. You don't have to change your identity. You can just take that Italian Asian influence and hold a special event. And then from there, you can get the feedback and make tweaks to your other menus. And here's what me and Chris were talking about social media. Chef Tanner was talking about social media before we got on here. And social media is a beast. Do you have to have social media? Yes, but it's not what you've been told or what you've been led to believe. Social media is there so when people find you, they can go somewhere and see if they're interested. Okay. That does not get you customers. You may have 1 million followers, but if the 1 million followers are in China, who's going to come to your restaurant? Nobody's going to come to your restaurant. Okay. Social media, the Instagram is there. They look at it, they see a great picture and say, hey, this looks like high quality food. Let's go visit there. We're talking about the way to get new customers. One of the clients that I had over in Dallas, over a 4-month period of time, we developed his SEO, search engine optimization, utilization, and redesigned his website. And I'm not even talking about redesign his main website. We're talking about the back end of his website. We redesigned it so that it would become one of the top 10 searches. And in fact, he became always constantly number two, number three. He'd hit number one in the search engines all the time. So the likelihood of him getting clicks were, higher. And after 4 months, he started to see anywhere between 20 and 30% new customers per month. New customers. That's the thing is we got our old ones, we got our ones that are just drive-bys, but these new customers, out of that new customer, he's converting 10 to 15% of those new customers into repeat clients. That's huge. Okay. So search engine optimization is where it's at. Now, I'm going to give you the clue what it is. You can always contact me. I'll help you guys. I'll give you some techniques. We don't have time to go into all the details. And FYI, I have a technology and a marketing background. And so what I do is I create a menu, one web page for every single menu item that you have, right? And it's loaded with pictures, okay? Because behind the pictures, nobody can read the metadata behind it. What is this picture of? This picture is the best burger in Austin, right? The best wings in Charlotte, okay? So inside those back of those pictures, you are bragging on your restaurant. We are voted the number one, yin yang restaurant in Tampa. Behind those pictures, nobody reads it, right? People get put off by arrogance, but the reason why we're doing it is because search engines only read the information and they categorize you based on what that is. If you're the best, I better put you higher in the search engine order than if I just said, "Oh, I have fried rice here." Well, everybody has fried rice, right? So you have to brag yourself behind those pictures. Now those pages are only a one-way link. They come up on the search engine, they hit it. That's what the person's interested in because they wanted to have, airline chicken tonight, right? So it shows them a great picture and thing, and it says, click here for main page or order page. They click it, it takes them back to your original website. They can't go back from there, but they can go to your original website and they can browse and see things. But now, instead of a website with a handful of pages, you have a website that's 30, 40, 50, 100 pages. It sounds overwhelming. It really isn't. Once you build it, it's almost set and forget. Okay. But we trick the SEO algorithm to make you the best customer. So when you're looking at these new items, I highly suggest that you create, a very attractive web page for each one of those new items that you are creating. Okay. Right now we run out of time. We're about, I just want to get some of your feedback on your Q&A. I have links here on my slide deck that you can go and check out more global trends. Christiana, I'm going to turn it over to you and we can get some Q&A going.
Yeah, I've got a few questions for you, Chef.
Sure.
Why do you believe global flavors are trending more than they have in the past?
Um, it's really probably just the thought of is we were in a very cultural, set in our trains, Americana, through the 50s, 60s, 70s, all right? And then all of a sudden in the 80s, we started seeing a little more flair for foods. And what came out near the end of the 80s? Network TV, the Food Channel, Travel Channel, and so forth. So people are starting to see that there's this global world out there, except for, I have a tennis teacher over here for my children, and we call him 5 Mile Mike because the guy probably never has been, further than 5 miles from his front door, right? But now we have this world of, Anthony Bourdain traveling the world, this, that, everything. People see it, they want to try it, and those are the influence that came there. But once they try it, they realize this is a very palatable item. Not, I'm not going to go to Asia and eat, and eat some mudfish because it's just disgusting, right? They like it, I don't. But Korean barbecue is just American sweet barbecue, you know.
Yeah.
Pork carnitas is just the best roasted pork ever, So it really is because our awareness and globalization and here's the other thing. When I lived in Temecula, California, right on the mouth of wine country, the one grocery store had had produce from Egypt, things I'd never seen before that we got to trend. Now we have the shipping lanes. I know COVID messed that up a little bit, but it's coming back. But we have access. Because here's the interesting thing. I have never eaten a cantaloupe. I'm
Really?
only eating muskmelon. All
Yeah.
cantaloupe in the United States is muskmelon.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Cantaloupe over Europe's that little yellow, green, warty looking thing.
Oh yeah.
I want to eat a cantaloupe before I die.
All
Okay.
right, we're going to do one more question. I think we got time for. Then we got to close up. But what is your favorite holiday dish you've either created or come across that incorporates global flavors, particularly with the holidays coming up?
Ah, gosh, you know what? Turkey's so versatile. I mess with turkey left and right. So this year I deboned my turkey, right? And I created a wet brine that had about 20 different mushrooms in it and so forth. And I did start with a Costco hack because they have a really good brine there. But then I added the flavors. But what I did was I smeared the gochujang on the outside of it. When I took
Yeah.
it out of the brine, I put it uncovered in the refrigerator for 2 days, and I put a light glaze of the gochujang and chicken bouillon. Chicken bouillon's a really
Yep.
good barbecue hack. Um, and then when I smoked it off, I didn't taste Korean flavors, but that pepper, smoke, and bouillon just pulled in because I use cherry wood, hickory wood, apple, mesquite, and all that. And I hate smoked turkey, and this one it was to die for.
It sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Chef. Uh, any closing comments you want to make?
No, I just want to say is we're going to give you the slide deck. I know it's kind of hard in a short, compressed time frame. And since I like interacting with people asking me questions, it's kind of hard because I just ramble. But there's lots of great resources there. My name at gmail.com. So clydetanner@gmail.com. If you have any questions, you can contact me. I'm always willing to help a fellow, ACF associate out, and I can give you free advice, in the business world, this world, that world, legal world, and so forth. No free legal advice, but I can tell you where to
Don't give
get it.
legal advice.
Right.
Well,
I'm
thank
the
you, Chef.
world's worst lawyer.
Thank you, Chef. I definitely
All right.
appreciate
Thank
you, and it
you.
was a very informative presentation. We appreciate having you on. We appreciate taking the time, sharing important insights on global flavors for the holidays. And thank you again to today's webinar sponsor, Schwann's. Please be on the lookout for the survey you'll receive in the next day or so, which you'll need to complete to earn your continuing education hours. We hope you'll join us on our final webinar of the year, December 11th, as we look back on the trends of this past year and host a discussion on what's to come for 2025. Additionally, all ACF members are invited to tune in December 19th for the ACF National President's Town Hall meeting, where President Rene Marquis will be answering member questions. To learn more about the upcoming webinars, visit acfchefs.org and click on the events tab. To register for the town hall or submit questions in advance for Chef Marquis, visit the members only portal. On behalf of the ACF National Office, thank you again, Chef, for bringing this opportunity, and thank you all for joining us today. I hope you all have a wonderful day.